minutes more for other people to come in. They can join once we've started, can't they, James?
Yes,
so if we
yeah,
do
they
the
just
introduction.
drop in.
Okay, that's good. I'm going to spotlight you, James, because otherwise we keep flashing back and forth between you and me. So, right, you get to see James now rather than me. Otherwise, it swaps back and forth between the people who's talking or not. You can still, can they still see me at all, James?
Yeah, they might be able to see you at the top. They'd be the people to ask.
Yeah. For those who are here, I don't have the hand at the bottom of my screen, I don't think, but should we do a little practice of raising our hands?
Yep, it's probably worth doing, just running through the features, and I'll let you do that this time.
Okay, I'll try and do this. I'll do this again in a minute, but I'll try and do it now, and then James can correct me. So first of all, you might need to tap the screen if it's on your phone, or it'll already be visible at the bottom of the window there. You should see a little hand, and you can click on that to raise your hand. So let me just look at the attendees first. There we go. Trevor got it. Sarah got it. Oh, wow, everyone got it. That's it, except Jackie.
Yep.
Oh, Jackie, never mind.
I think
you
Jackie
don't have to
just
raise your hand.
joined, so she might have missed the bit about raising your hand.
Okay. All right, that's good. So the raising your hand is just a way of drawing our attention to the fact that you want to intervene. And I'm quarterbacking it, which means I'm sort of the moderator or compere. So it's up to me to spot that and then interrupt James and let him know. And you're happy for interruptions, aren't you, James?
Yep, I'm happy with interruptions. Yeah. It gives me something to talk about.
Okay. So the first thing we've got is that we can raise our hands as a way of requesting that we intervene. And then I think on the bottom of my screen, I've got something called Q&A. And the Q&A allows you to submit a question by typing it in. And so if anyone wants to do that, you can type in a random question, and that should appear on the speaker's screen and on my screen. And I see the question and answers, which I can then put to James at an appropriate time. At the moment, there's no open questions. There you go,
now
there's
have
one.
A question.
Sarah Bohr says, I can't see you on my screen, so I'll put that to the speaker. James, why can't Sarah see you on the screen?
Is that either of us, or is that just
No,
Sarah?
just me.
Just you. That's because
Darryl,
you set it to spotlight me.
Yeah, and Darryl asks potato aquavit or grain aquavit.
I've never actually tried potato, so I'll give that a go. If you feel like sending some
that's
over.
Answered live and done. Can't see you on your screen. That's been answered live and done. So I've cleared those, and we've got 2 answered questions. Good. Oh, and Susan's arrived. Hello, Susan.
You know, if you don't explain about the mute, all I've got is this mental image of people yelling at their computer and wondering why you're not responding.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm not going to allow you all to talk because I'm not sure that I can then turn it off quickly and shut you up. But once I'm practiced, I will. So at the moment, we're ready for the speaker, and all your microphones are muted. So it's no good speaking. But all right, just to go through once more, you can find the little icon that's a raised hand, and that raises your hand. You can put your hand down now. I'm lowering it for you, Trevor. So Trevor's hand has gone down now, and that is a means of asking to intervene in some way. And then you can go to the Q&A, and the Q&A allows you to type in a question, which I will see as that arises, and James can answer those as well.
You can also use the Q&A if you've got any technical questions about how Zoom works or how to do something, particularly before we've finished the intro, because that's the time when we can answer. After that, I'll be distracted just trying to think of things to say.
Yes, and I must point out, James is the only one who really knows how to use Zoom properly. So if you ask me, I'm just going to go, oh my goodness, I don't know what. So we'll all hope it works okay. Are we ready? Yeah, we have 7 people logged in. Do we want to wait a minute more?
We've got 15 watching on the live feed, so I'd say go.
Okay, we'll go with it then. All right, I'm going to put James on. I'm going to go on speaker view, which is going to. Can you see both of us on the screen? No. Just James.
Yeah, you spotlighted me.
Okay. All right, so now I go gallery view. I click on me and I spotlight me. Now I can't, wait, here we go. More. Oh no, that's no good. I can't do that. All right, we'll just have to look at James and, oh,
I've
here we are.
spotlighted you.
Thank you very much. The non-host has spotlighted the actual host. So welcome to Cafe Scientific, or Cyber Cafe Scientific, actually. This is the second of these we've done online. Just a little bit of background. So Cafe Sci, as we call it, is a free open access forum for open science. Open science being anything at all of interest, vaguely scientific. And it's strange because the whole point of it is to be micro-local. It's supposed to be a small group of people and you just invite them to a cafe or a bar and the speaker just holds forth about science. Ours has been hosted originally in a wine bar in Woking, Cella Magnaval. Hello, Cella Magnaval. And they were very good. And we grew a little bit there and then moved to the Lightbox Gallery in Woking. And with the isolation, we sort of had the idea that we could take it online, which of course means that we're a bit more global than we were, which we sort of lose the local aspect. But just to give you an idea of the flavor, and you might not have time to do that this time, but it's supposed to be a cafe. So you're supposed to be there and just talking to your friends and so on. And you have a drink. I've got a glass of whiskey. You can have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a glass of water, or anything you like. The idea is just to enjoy the ambience and as much as possible try to be there and come out of our isolation for a moment and hear something interesting. Tonight's speaker is James. And James, we have to thank also for setting this up because he knew how to set up the Zoom online video conferencing and how to host and so on. But today, because James is speaking, I'm doing what's called quarterbacking. So in principle, I'm running or managing the session or attempting to, but I do get a bit confused, so bear with me. And just to go through, as attendees, there are two ways you can intervene. You're not able to talk because all your microphones are muted, otherwise we just get a sort of cacophony of sound. But if you search on your screen, and you might have to tap the screen if it's your phone or hover the mouse over the window if you're on a PC, you should see a raised hand icon. And if you click on that, it will raise a hand that I will see and James will see. And we'll try to then react to it and say, oh, somebody wants to intervene. Yeah, we could allow you to talk at that point, but we'll probably type something to you so we can chat with you to talk about it. And that'd be my job. The other thing is you've got a little icon Q&A, which is two thought bubbles or speech bubbles. And that allows you to type in a question at any time. And those questions are seen by both me and James. And then I'll give James the opportunity to answer them. So that's the way that we'll interact at the moment. And when we go to the question and answer session at the end, then we will try to open things up a little bit more and let people speak or be on video. James, you're happy to take questions as you go through?
I am, yes, and I'm just about to answer one, which is no, you can't see any other attendees, and it's set up that way for a reason. We are considering opening it up more, but because it's gone very public from quite a small group, we want people to feel safe attending.
Okay, well spotted, speaker. That's good. The speaker did what the quarterback is supposed to do by spotting the question up there. That's excellent. So I'll give James an introduction. First of all, he's my son and was brought up with computers from an incredibly young age. I think probably before the age of 1 he was tapping around on them. But he's a cybersecurity specialist. He's extremely knowledgeable, and he's been recently most famous for running the cybersecurity school, which is aimed at children from 7 to 11, and there's another session, I think, from 11 to 13, something like that. I think you've got about 10,000 attendees, haven't you, James?
Not quite that many. There's 3 different tiers, and we started out with key stages, but it's now gone to beginner, intermediate, and advanced because some of the 7-year-olds got my lessons and seized them with both hands, and some of the parents were completely baffled by them. So we've shifted the way that we describe them. But yeah,
okay,
no, it's 3 classes a day, just for the next 2 weeks on various cybersecurity concepts, free on YouTube.
Okay, and I think that's very worth following, even if you're not a 7 to 11-year-old, because it's at about my level. And I think you get to make a paper model of the Enigma machine, which is kind of actually very
That's
cool.
a spoiler. That's a spoiler for tomorrow.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry. I'm not mentioning that.
The
That was
live,
a secret
the live
coded message.
broadcast tomorrow, which is definitely not pre-recorded.
Okay, that's good. All right. So today, James has elected to talk about a topic that's not in the slightest related to the coronavirus epidemic. And it's if you have an emergency of some kind that threatens, do you attempt to control it, to lock it down, to prevent it happening, or do you attempt to build a system that's resilient to it? Any parallels with coronavirus epidemic are entirely accidental, but I think we'll have an interesting time. So, James, ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I'm going to speak of you, which is you, and I think you are now spotlighted. Spotlight video. That means,
yeah.
There you go.
Right, so I'm going to start out by, sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. Slight household issues there. But yes, so I'm going to open up by talking about the internet, which everyone, even people who aren't particularly familiar with it, will have had a lot more experience of just recently. And it's about the design philosophy of the internet as it was built. One of the key things that was meant to be the design, and it's not quite worked out, was that it was meant to be democratic, decentralized, completely distributed. With the idea being, as it was built as a military communications project, that in the event of a nuclear war taking out half the US, the rest of it would still be able to talk and launch nukes back. Not the most auspicious start, but it has meant we have ended up with a very anarchic more than democratic setup for the internet. There are points of failure where if certain exchanges go down, large areas are without connection, but ultimately you can route around them if you're not in those areas, which is a very interesting setup because in cybersecurity, one of the big things that always comes up, and I will argue security is a science, so that's why it's appropriate here, but one of the things that comes up is all about control and controlling your users, preventing them from clicking on links, controlling your servers, preventing people from accessing them, controlling your data, keeping it all centralized in one place so that you know exactly where the boundaries are. And this is absolutely fantastic if you want to build a robust system. Unfortunately, as we're seeing in some cases, and this is definitely not due to any ongoing situations, but as we're seeing, centralization means that your robust solution, if it does break, breaks utterly. There is no routing round, there is no damage control. If you rely on, for example, everything in a central office to do your work, then you can't simply shift to everyone working at home without huge effort and investment. And a lot of companies have put that in. But they're then not set up for the change in philosophy that it requires. So what we end up with is companies who now have a distributed workforce and no control over it because they aren't built to do a resilient solution as opposed to a robust solution. And these are concepts we use in an area of security called business continuity. A robust solution is one that is very unlikely to break. It's built with lots of armor, it's built with an extra power supply, it's buried 10 feet underground with 10-foot concrete walls. It's incredibly robust. You make sure it doesn't break. The problem you have with a robust solution is black swan events, things that you don't expect to happen. And when those do happen, your system breaks down utterly and it's not resilient. And a robust solution, by its very nature, can't be resilient because being robust requires you to have everything built into the center and everything's centralized and under central control, carefully measured, able to swap things out when needed, yes, which is an aspect of resiliency, but most importantly, it's that fortification around it. A resilient solution, truly resilient, goes completely against that philosophy, because what you're doing with a resilient solution is saying, I expect 30%, 50%, 70% of what I've put in place to break down. I expect it to blow up. I expect it to not work. And so I'm going to plan for that. And that's where the internet has done some amazing things. So a few years ago, there was an outage while building for the Olympics. And I still remember that lovely time when we were optimistic about the country, where someone cut one of the main internet feeds through London. And it took down most of London for about 16 hours in terms of internet connectivity. And the only thing the rest of the world noticed was that services that were hosted in London weren't working. That was it. Whereas if that had been, say, major printers, something where you have got that centralized infrastructure, what people would have noticed would have been critical services were down. Mobile networks are a similar thing. So mobile networks are deliberately designed with enough overlap that to take out an area, for an area to lose connectivity, except in some rural areas where there are different challenges, but you need to take out more than one mobile tower. And yes, it's possible, but you'd need to do either mass damage or deliberately sabotage multiple towers. So it's a resilient solution. Taking down one tower wouldn't be particularly difficult. You could do it with a pair of wire cutters to get through the fence, going at night, wrapping up in tinfoil to avoid heat detectors, being bulletproof if it's one of the military ones, a few other bits and pieces. But you could take a single mobile tower down. But it's not designed to be robust. It's not designed to keep you from doing a bit of damage. It's designed to keep you from doing enough damage to affect the system as a whole. We're even seeing this now with the government's approach to Huawei, which isn't quite as much in the news as it was, but there were massive arguments about it. And the big argument was that Huawei is potentially an agent of a foreign and potentially hostile state. Now, I'm not getting into the politics of that, but let's say you've got a provider who wants to sell you some stuff for your critical national infrastructure, and you don't trust them at all. Your choices then are either don't allow them in at all, in which case you're then down to, say, 2 other providers, and you have to trust them absolutely, or say to them, okay, but you can only build a third of it, because you're already planning, or you know that the people building it are planning in enough redundancy, enough resilience, that if that third went down, or if that third went rogue, you could cut it out of the system entirely and it would still work. And even though they're not trusted, you've got a lower risk at having an untrusted person providing a non-critical amount of your infrastructure than 2 trusted people, each providing a critical amount. So 3 partners, each building a third, where you know you can afford to lose a third at a time and still keep it limping along, is better than 2 partners building 50%, where if one of them goes down, you know you don't have the capacity for it to continue. So this is where it's about distribution or decentralization or resilience as opposed to control, because you have to give up some of that control. But the big thing that has been gradually learned in security is giving up that control doesn't mean you trust someone more. It means that you plan for them to fall down, you plan for a service to fail, and you build up spare capacity and you build up other routes and alternatives to work around it. And I imagine a lot of people, anyone who's still now working, if you're working at home, you've discovered that your companies have suddenly discovered what resilience is. They've discovered that a lot of their critical stuff is no longer critical. But people who are furloughed have discovered that their companies were not set up for resilience. They were set up for robustness. They were set up for that centralized control and that central governance of their systems. So, Internet teaches us a great lesson about resilience versus control, or distribution and decentralization versus centralization. And it teaches that about technology in a lovely way. But how does this apply more widely? Well, if you're willing to do more delegation, if you're willing to not necessarily trust, but give up control to smaller units in your network, you've strengthened the resilience of those units because they no longer rely on the central point. And this works across absolutely any system you can think of. It works in healthcare. It works in logistics networks, where now we've got, yes, central hubs, but we've also got smaller local distribution hubs. And you've seen how well that's working for Amazon, who've just taken this hit and run with it. And they've got a central warehouse, but then a very decentralized network from there. You've got similar things, or you had similar things with the NHS. At one point, the NHS was much more decentralized. The different units had much more autonomy. And so they could absorb shocks better because a part might fall over, but it wouldn't overwhelm the whole thing. There is a trade-off, which is, in that case, you accept some parts of it are going to be sacrificed. And with the NHS, if we had that fully decentralized model, we would have to accept that. We're somewhere between fully centralized and decentralized now with the various regional trusts. And so you're getting to see both sides of it to a degree. There's certain trusts that are being overwhelmed and others aren't, and they are communicating and working together, but the failures are regional rather than national. It works the same, well, again, with just about anything you care to name. There's some councils which are absorbing this extremely well because they've got the autonomy to deal with it, but councils that are failing on that local level, and they are failing utterly because there isn't that robust central system that they can fall back on and escalate things to. So this isn't decentralization and moving power away from the center is absolutely the right thing to do. This is about the balance between the two, which again is a key thing we deal with in security, because we need that central governance. We do need to make sure that personal data is not spread across 200,000 people's laptops who've got complete control of it. We do need to make sure of that. But also we need to make sure that a business or a service can keep operating when the central body that controls it is gone. And it is a science, but there is an art aspect to it at the moment, and that's because this sort of situation or similar situations are things that have been thought of but have never been tested before. Companies will say, oh yes, we do a disaster recovery test. We know what would happen if a meteor hit our server room. Well, they don't. They know what they think would happen if they were in control of every piece of that situation and understood the whole thing entirely, but they don't actually have any idea what will really happen. Because you can't, well, you can test for that, and you should test for that, and you should go through that exercise. But to test for it, you need to break your own systems. So again, it's that trade-off. Really, this is just about the way that there are trade-offs in all of these systems, and there are advantages to resilient approaches and decentralization. Equally, there are advantages to that central control. It is all about balance between the two, and it is all about getting the right models and deciding what impact you accept, whether you would prefer to risk the whole system going down, but make it very unlikely it will, or whether you would prefer to accept that some parts of the system will break and will have an impact, but you want to keep that as local as possible. That's it, more a philosophical and semi-scientific rant than anything else about business continuity. So I'd like to open up to questions now. Chris. You are still on mute.
unmute. There you go. Can you now see me? No, I'm rubbish at this. Right, here we go.
There you go. I've
Spotlight
done it.
video. Oh, you did it, but I did it. I undid it.
There we go. Gallery view. That saves you doing anything else.
Right. Can everybody see me? All right. Thank you very much, James. There isn't actually an applause button here, but I think we could use the raise hand button. So if you just click the raise hand button, we can give James a round of applause on here. Thank you very much indeed. I will lower all of those now. One of the questions that came in during this, just to give James a little bit of time off, was can we see all participants? And there's reasons why we're not doing that yet, but I think that might be something we'll try to consider as long as we can do it safely and securely at some point, because it gives you more of a sort of overall feel to things. James, how does this all apply to the current situation?
It defines the current situation. So if you are working at home and have noticed hardly any impact except a lot more Zoom meetings, which is one thing I've noticed, and that suddenly there is no cut-off between working time and home time, then you've got a resilient organisation. You're seeing it in action. If you haven't got that and are either having to, and both of these are unfortunate, either having to go into the office or have been furloughed, you've seen what happens when a robust system breaks. And it's all about the science of risk acceptance. And there was a decision made by the companies involved that have had to do this, except in some cases where there is an absolute dependency on physical presence. And the decision that they made was that they can accept the risk that if everything around them breaks down, their business will stop. Whereas others weren't necessarily thinking explicitly about it, but have built their businesses and their operations in a more distributed way. That means they're not facing that same risk. They don't suffer from that threat in the same way because they're not built in a way that exposes them to it.
So the lessons we learn from what's happening at the moment are IT lessons as well as virus and pandemic lessons.
It's system lessons. It's all just systems. So it could be IT systems, it could be business operation systems, it could be healthcare, it could be bin collection systems. You can take your pick. They are all just interrelated systems, and you cannot realistically separate them all from a threat that can affect all of them. Internet's a good example. If you lost the internet on a national level, you would lose almost every other service in the country, because we do not have the capacity to operate them now without that level of communication. We simply don't.
Okay, we've got a question from Sarah, and I'm going to allow her to talk to try that out. Would you hold on a second so you can ask your question, Sarah?
Yes, but you are on mute. We were hearing you through Chris's microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Right, so I was thinking about the testing situation at the moment. It seemed that at first the Public Health England wanted to keep testing very centralised because they were concerned about the quality of the testing and not wanting to get higher false positives and false negatives. Is that a mistake? Is it better for them to go for a less centralised testing system and use the facilities in universities and schools and hospitals? Or are they right to try and maintain the testing at a high standard in their centralised labs?
I won't necessarily say it's a mistake. I will say it's a choice, and I'm assuming they've made it on what they consider a good basis. However, going extremely towards centralisation or extremely towards decentralisation is generally a bad idea. The balance is what you want to strike. And I did notice that one of my old companies have actually set up their theme park as a drive-through testing centre. So there is some decentralisation going on. I would say that I can understand the concerns about false positive, false negative results. But one thing that's actually important is, I did have a discussion earlier today with someone. If the test had a very high false positive result, it would be worth doing. If it had a very high false negative result, it wouldn't. And the reason for that is, while the false positive will cause alarm, it's already causing alarm. What false positives would then do is encourage people to self-isolate more. So anyone who tested positive would obviously go through that self-isolation, and all right, they might come out of it thinking I'm safe now and then be reinfected. But it is that whole thing about flattening the curve that we've had discussions about.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Trevor Banks.
You're on mute, Chris.
Chris, you're muted.
Here we go. I'm going to bring in Trevor Banks, who has a question about, where are we? There you go, Trevor. Can you say your question?
I was interested comparing us to the States, the US, where individual states seem to be competing with other states for resources like ventilators. And would you class that as decentralization and resilience? Because I'm not sure the guys in New York would say that's a good system at the moment.
As I said, being a resilient system, being decentralized, doesn't mean it's good or the right solution. It is about a balance. And the problem they've got there is too much autonomy, too much resilience edges into anarchy, and your different units start acting completely autonomously. So there is a need for a level of governance over them all to keep everyone cooperating. Or even if it's not that people, generally, it's not that people have bad intentions and are thinking, I want to do this at the expense of everyone else. It's people thinking, I think I need to do this, therefore I will, and not considering other people's needs because they're not communicated properly. And that's where the whole idea of governance comes in, that someone has to look at the wider picture and make a decision, and there has to be then acceptance of that at a lower level for it to work.
Okay. Thank you very much. And now we've got a supplementary from Sarah, who I'm going to unmute. Can you read your question, Sarah?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Yeah, good. Okay, so is it, if you've got a robust system, is it quicker to change from a robust system to a resilient system, or is it quicker to change from a resilient system to a robust system?
The best answer I can give there is no. It's a lot depends on your system's culture, if it's a human-based system, or the technologies you've used. So generally, if you've got a robust system, and let's say we're talking about a company because that's the area I'm most familiar with, that's the easiest to work with. If you have built in a very robust way, traditionally, over say 20 years, there will be a lot of opposition against moving to a resilient system because people see it as giving up control. Equally, if you've got a resilient system, but one such as the States where units are fighting against each other, but you've built that way from the start, there will be a lot of opposition to moving to a robust system because it will be seen as giving up control. But it will be seen as giving up control by those individual units. So the answer is, it's slow to move from a robust system to a resilient system, or vice versa. You can actually build a system that's both, and that's both slow to build and extremely expensive.
So that would be like the programming language Ada, I think.
Yeah, so Ada is incredibly robust. It's also resilient because it's mathematical, so you can do that when you're working in maths rather than in reality. But it is a lot of work to code in because it is a theoretically perfect programming language, and you can prove that a particular program is perfect in it.
And there's nothing better than a proper mathematical, logical proof that something works, even if it takes you a lifetime to prove it.
One of the big lessons I've learned in security and IT as a whole is that the pursuit of perfection is the enemy of actually getting anything done.
That's funny, because your grandfather used to say the best is the enemy of the good. He didn't apply that to my exam results, but he did apply it to engineering. Okay, do we have any more questions for James? I think possibly not. I'd just like to do a vote of thanks. I'd like to thank James for talking to us. Take a quick bow. We do that now. Instead of handshakes, we bow our head very briefly.
I thought it was all about the elbow bump.
An elbow bump, yeah. And since we lack an applause button, can we just click our hands up button to give James a quick round of applause? Well done. The thanks I want to give is twofold. So first of all, that James is the organizer of the Cyber Cafe, and he's using his own Zoom enterprise account to host these, which is very good of him. He's put in a lot of effort to make it work and to do the live stream on Facebook, and I think some other platforms as well. And this will be recorded and be available for view afterwards on Facebook and other social media platforms. So he's really the organizer of this, and took that on from me, who does the ones where it's just people coming down to a Lightbox Gallery Cafe and having a chat. This is a bit more of a technical challenge, and we hope it's going to grow from now on. And I'd also, of course, like to thank him as the speaker this time. So that was very fascinating. One thing I want to do, how can I put this back on me, James? Can I take the spotlight?
Give me 1 second, I'll spotlight you. There you go.
There you go. Okay, that's fine. So we're hoping to run these things weekly from now on, and we may do some ad hoc, because actually one of the interesting things is that we've got quite a lot of volunteer interested speakers coming up, and I think during the period of isolation it's quite nice to do this. Next week we have Dr. Katie Kennedy, who has talked at our Cafe Sci before on exercise motivation. So she studied and did a PhD in how to motivate people to exercise, or at least on what it is that motivates people to exercise. So how you keep exercising and continue to enjoy it. I met her because at that time we had a run group that had been going for a short time, and she came along to have beginner runners and studied them. So she ran along beside us, asking us all kind of questions, which was quite interesting, but concluded we were not actually good enough to, we were not beginner enough. But I think that's going to be a fascinating session. So the way you do this is to follow us on the Facebook group, or you can search for Cafe Sci online and you'll find a little website. But it's best to go to the Cyber Cafe Sci, not to the old one. So if you go to the Cyber Cafe Sci, you can register. You have to register through Eventbrite. It's free of charge to do so. There's an option, I think, to take a ticket that allows you to make a small donation, which might allow us to continue a license and things like that. But it's a free, open thing to register, and you should then get an invitation, which will allow you to join the next of these meetings and be reminded about future ones that come up afterwards. Okay, one last thing. If anyone's watching and you'd either like to speak yourself, or you know someone who'd like to speak, just get them to drop us a line on the Facebook page, or Cyber Cafe Sci on Twitter to follow us on there. Any other audience interaction that I need? No. All right, my final vote of thanks then is to you as the audience for attending. Please tell people about it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope very much that we see you next week. Bye for now.